Abidos. What's up, everybody? How's it going? Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. It's been long enough I get to say that.
It has been a while.
I bet I've said it and we just haven't noticed.
Probably. You're probably right. But the past couple of shows, I don't think we had a proper introduction for. Or maybe it was just last show. I don't know. I'm notorious for forgetting everything that I talked about, like, immediately upon the conclusion of the show. Like, people will make reference to something I said, and I'm just like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I'm like, oh, you said that on this week's episode. Oh, well, I will take your word for it because you listened to it and I did not, but I have no recollection whatsoever.
What was this week's episode?
Yeah, half the time when I'm doing the write-up for the episode, I've got to ask Mateo what we covered. What an asshole. I don't even remember the fucking show that I spent time doing.
We've done a lot of episodes, though, so.
We have. And then that's the other fucking stoner thing that I pull is, dude, I got this great idea for an episode. Then Mateo will be like, actually, that was episode 112, so, we already did that. I'm like, God damn it. Why does this not sound familiar to me at all? Probably because you're a goddamn stoner.
Yeah, I'm so glad I don't have to observe the show as an outsider, as receiving a show to listen to every week, because I've just cringed to think about how many times we've just sat here and downright repeated ourselves.
Yeah, if we, I know one thing is for certain, opinions have evolved over time on this show, and so it could be something where we did cover it in the first half of our show career, and we've evolved on it, so we're gonna cover it again, and I stand by that, because I think there's things, even if we did cover it, that I could do a better job now than I did then. So for all those people that have been around for a long time, if you ever listen to an old episode and were like, man, that episode would be a lot better if they did a better job, then let me know and I'll do a better job. Because there's a bunch of shit that I would like to cover again that I've already covered, and I can't find an excuse. But if somebody says, hey, Mike, that show you did could be better, do it again, I'll fucking do it, man. Don't threaten me with a good time. I mean, shit, we've had to re-record episodes because they got fucked up or because the sound quality sucked. So, and that's not fun, because it's like, hey, we just recorded this show yesterday, let's do it again. Or, hey, we just recorded this show twice earlier this week, let's do it one more time. Because then you just get like, you know what, fuck this show. I want to punch this show in the face. Like, you black-eyed satellite. Black-eyed satellite? What the fuck? Black Knight Satellite. Get fucked. That's why I debunked you, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, that we do a music discussion show for our Patreon.
Oh my god.
And we've recorded an episode entitled Our Favorite Heaviest Riffs 4 times. Once with a guest, Michael from the Text Files, and they've all been destroyed. All files have been corrupted.
The worst part about that is that Mateo wrote a metal version of one of the songs that I chose. I don't want to give that spoiler alert away, or I don't want to, I guess it's not a spoiler alert because I'm not giving it, but I don't want to give that spoiler because it's the Heaviest Riffs episode, and it's a very unlikely song. But Mateo did a metal version of it specifically for that song, and it's still not out anywhere because we haven't done the episode.
Yeah.
But if you're not a patron, join Patreon so that you can eventually, one glorious day, hear the episode and the beautiful music that Mateo made for it.
Yes, we can only persist against the podcast gods once or twice. At 4, we have to turn our backs on that episode and retry at another time. But that's not this episode. This episode.
No, that's not.
About weird shit in Egypt.
Or from Egypt.
Or around Egypts. All the Egypts.
Yes, every last one of the Egypts.
Well, I'm going to start it off by, you told me to look something up in reference to what you stumbled upon. I instantly think of Stargates when I think of strange shit in Egypt or ancient civilization stuff. And doing research, all I did was run into that 90s movie. Did you come across the same thing?
Yeah, I've actually done that same thing before because I looked up Stargate and or Stargate Ancient World or Stargate Egypt, and I think it's because of what we're looking up, the fact that we're looking up the term Stargate. I think that's what the problem is, because everything with the term Stargate, like, I don't know if that term was really used all that much before the movie.
Okay.
So when you're looking up Stargate Egypt, the movie inevitably comes up, followed by the show. And I mean, there's been like 4 seasons of the show or something, maybe even more. Fuck, I don't know. And there have been a couple sequels that were like direct to DVD movies, and then the movie itself. So there's like a lot of mythology to draw, and like it's got its own Wikia page with the mythology and everything around it. So there's a lot of shit out there. Yeah. But it's all related to the show. So it's really you got to be careful. But yeah, that's also what I like when I think of weird Egypt. I think of the fucking Stargate.
Yeah.
That big fucking, like the one from the movie with the big circular thing with the hieroglyphs around it. And the weird watery, whatever you want to call it, portal.
Yeah, it almost seems like all the weird paranormal, supernatural, ancient history stuff kind of just makes you think of the stars or space travel, or for some weird way. I tried to not read anything from Ancient Aliens when going over this stuff. But even without their influence, when I think about like what could be the weirdest thing in Egypt, or the biggest secret or hidden secret or buried secret, it's got to be some type of, I don't know what else can explain all the magnificent things that were there. I mean, just the places that we're going to talk about, I got to watch some interesting videos on them, and it just single stones and archways are so big that even some place that's readily known like these places, it's hard to accept that they exist. You look at some of these stones and it's hard to fathom how they just got those stones up, leave alone the pyramids and all this shit. It's just amazing.
Yeah. And the fact that we to this day don't know how the pyramids were done, like some of the stones on the pyramid, we don't even have technology or vehicles that can maneuver them. And the fact that they were able to not only get them up there with such precision and without the use of mortar.
Yeah, exactly. You see the same type of thing going on in some of these tombs and temples. It's just, the pyramids, yeah, that's strange. But look, even just this doorway, how? I don't get it. Such beautiful stuff there. But when Mike came across what he's going to talk about, he told me to look up a place called Abydos. And we were talking about Stargate, Mike. I guess the old man in that movie that was from that land, his name was Abydos.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
But Abydos,
I did not realize that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I came across when I was looking this stuff up. It was a clip called Abydos Does Something. I was like, what? And it was from that movie, and it was all about that dude. But Abydos should stand out for a couple of reasons. There you can find the temple of King Sethos I. And this is also where you can find the famous helicopter hieroglyph. Now, about that hieroglyph, Mike, fuck a helicopter. There's fucking planes and straight up UFOs on this one slab. Now, I found a couple good videos on this, and if you guys don't know, if you go to our YouTube channel, if I find shit or reference YouTube videos, most of the time I throw them in a playlist we have for this called Show Note Videos. So you can go check it out after the show comes out and watch the videos we're talking about. But I know I've heard about it. I've seen the helicopter hieroglyph. You've seen it, right, Mike?
Oh yeah. Anyone that's seen Ancient Aliens has seen that like a million times. But right next to it, isn't there a jet right next to it?
There is a jet. There's a UFO. There's an airplane. It's just amazing. I'm gonna draw out so it doesn't, so it's not on a stone background and depth doesn't come into play. But if I draw out what's there, it's really amazing. But are you familiar about where it is? Because it's so weird where it's at in this temple.
Isn't it on like above an archway or be above a doorway or something?
Yeah, it's the center stone in this archway that's very tall, and there's 3 stones that make up the top of this archway, and they both I guess they're supposed to be depicting the pharaoh defeating something they call the 9 bows, I guess, which the major threats against Egypt. The first 2 they can explain, and even the guy in the video who's the tour guide there says we can't really interpret what this fucking one means. It shows these helicopters and shit like that, but it's really amazing. And he made a good point in the video that he's like, if we're talking about just artistically valuing this, the craftsman who made this, we see the symbols from the other 2 stones repeated all over the place. It's part of the language. But we don't see these symbols repeated, and I thought that was strange as well.
I have heard it that, and this could just be like the Egyptian cover-up that we've talked about, where the tour guides and everything are in on it. But I have heard people say that have gone there that the tour guides tell them it looks that way because it had been carved over. It was initially one hieroglyph and then someone came in later and like essentially crossed it out.
Well, see, that's interesting you say that, because in this video the tour guide points out where you can see where they did that. They replaster areas, and the parts where this helicopter where the helicopter is, it's untouched. It's all the original parts.
So the helicopter part was not carved over.
No, it doesn't look like it at all. There's other parts where you can see where they've crudely chiseled away parts and put some type of plaster that's set at just a slightly off color. It's really weird. There's some parts in there that are so beautifully preserved. You can see that, like, even these big walls where you see like the giant carving of the pharaoh and he's reaching out doing something, whatever. They all have like blue backgrounds and red backgrounds. They're not just, you get to see, they're so well preserved in some places you get to see all the colors that went into them. But there's a couple other symbols that are around in this temple that are strange. I found another video where a guy, he's got some interesting stuff to talk about, a little new agey, but he talks about how, and he shows examples of certain gods appearing in a scene, and they're coming out of what looks like a lotus. And he goes on to explain how that's almost like a portal, and that's why it's showing a god appear in an earthly situation coming through this thing. That's a portal, their way of getting to this realm or to Earth. And it's just very interesting. He points out, I noticed it right away, because the way they depict these portals looks a lot like the collars, like the round, droopy collars that you see on a lot of pharaohs. And it kind of depicts like their heads coming out of a portal. And he mentions, if you observe,
the pharaoh's heads coming out of the portal,
it kind of looks like that. If you look at like the old Egyptian like headdress collar parts that just kind of droop down low, and they're kind of, it's kind of layers of loops that go up to the neck. It's almost the same way they depict these lotus portals on other engravings. If you see the engravings of these portals with the goddesses and the gods popping out of, you'll instantly recognize it as the same design of engravings of these neck dressings or collar dressings on pharaohs. It's not like similar. It's like, oh, well, that's like the same thing right there. So maybe that's meant to symbolize them being of the ability to do that. That's just something that they're able to do. But also in Abydos is the Temple of Hathor, which has the famous light bulb hieroglyph. And that one's always neat, and it's fun to see it in context. But to take a tour, I found a 3D video on YouTube of somebody walking around this place. So that's in that playlist as well. But when you get to see all the artwork that's around it, it's so masterful. I mean, there's no there's no sloppy handwriting when it comes to this shit. There's no stuttering. There's no, certain afflictions that a different artist has that's so off that you can't tell what things mean. And to see all these wonderful depictions of, jackals, birds, warriors, all the normal symbols that you'd think, when you think of hieroglyphs, it's weird to see that light bulb. It's even struck me as more odd because, again, I didn't see, from what I saw and what I researched for the show, anything that looked like that light bulb at all. It looks just so much deliberately made to look like a light bulb.
Yeah, and even with the filament in there and everything, and it's not quite the filament like we were used to, because the old, I see, they don't even really make them with the filament anymore, but the way that it used to be was like 2 prongs with a coil connecting them, and it's not so much like that anymore. Well, I mean, now it's fucking, there aren't filaments whatsoever, but
I just had to change my headlights, and the filaments that's in those things actually looked a lot like that engraving.
Oh, really? For yeah, I guess I'm not. I mean, I've changed a headlight, but I haven't really taken a look at the filament. I'm just going based on the old school house ones.
Yes,
you'd put in the lamp.
The one I installed had like 4 prongs, 2 different light settings for filament, so it looks super weird.
Yeah, but who knows, with whatever technology they had at the time, maybe it was something different.
Yep.
I mean, we've got different light bulbs now that don't even require filament, so who knows.
Another interesting thing I found out about Abydos was a place there called the Mountain of Anubis, and located at the foot of this mountain is the tomb of King Sensoret, the 5th king of the 12th dynasty. And it is said to be the earliest example of what they call a royal Amduat tomb. Do you know what that is?
I haven't the foggiest clue.
A very rough translation of that word is kind of like a special tomb that's made to be a portal to the afterlife or underworld.
Oh, shit.
Oh, shit.
That sounds super serial.
It does. And lastly, Abydos should sound familiar, because that's where good old Seti, past life persona of Miss Dorothy Eddy, was a priestess. She was a priestess of Abydos. And she said she fell in love with Sethos I when he was trying to make eyes and play big hands with her.
Can she prove any of that?
I don't know. You'd have to go back and listen to our episode about Dorothy Eddy and see if you buy it.
I bet I don't, but maybe I do. I don't know.
But that's a lot.
That she had a lot of. If she was wrong, didn't she have a hand in a discovery?
Oh yeah,
like her past life self had told them where to dig.
Yeah, where the gardens were and stuff around that temple. They have the I'm an asshole. The wells of eternal water that were there, I believe. She said, like, yeah, over here used to be garden and there were wells, and they dug there, and they're like, oh shit, you're right. And then there's even like a passageway that she said that used to be there that they hadn't found, and they're like, no, that's not there, and they found it years later.
That's awesome. So she was proven right even after the fact.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting. So much interesting things in one place. Good old Abydos.
Well,
a potential portal too.
A potential portal, you say?
Yes, sir. That's what what's the term? I forget. That's Amduat tomb.
A Stargate?
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe just like what they're doing with.
So instead of the underworld, maybe it was another world.
Maybe, because that's, again, with those light bulbs, seeing the other depictions of other things, they know what they're trying to say. They're this isn't primitive writing here. You can tell the artistry and the craftsmanship. It's, it doesn't kind of look like a fucking cat. It's a cat. You can tell. And same thing with like the Lotus stuff being a depiction of how they're coming out of these portals. And again, in that video, I'll put it in the show notes and in that YouTube playlist. You can see that they're coming out of this flower-like thing that he describes. It doesn't look too much like a flower, but that's a lotus, and gives examples of other pictures of lotuses, even in other cultures. close to Egypt. And so he confirms, like, yeah, okay, that's a lotus, but maybe that's the best thing they could use to describe what they're seeing. Maybe this portal or whatever, or the special tomb, has a portal maybe to what they can only describe as the afterlife or the underworld. What if it just was the vastness of outer space?
And because it's dark, they thought it was the overworld.
Yeah, it could have been anything. But
I
then
like
again,
this theory.
yeah, but
it's fun.
it is fun. But then if we're gonna go down that route, we got to go all full Indiana Jones, ancient Egyptian fucking theorist guy, because he's had to walk through
I
that.
wouldn't have it any other way.
Because he's had to have walked through that and been able to report all the things he saw and what is written down as the Egyptian afterlife. What if you went in there and saw, God damn it, Mike, you know his name. The giant crocodile weighs your heart against a feather. Everybody's got a tattoo of it.
No, you're thinking Anubis.
Yeah. What if you went in there and...
He's a jackal head.
No, there's one. There's a giant alligator. Or crocodile, I'm sorry.
Is it Sekhmet?
I don't know. I forget. I'm an a-hole.
Hold on. I need to look.
Yeah.
I need to look.
But what if you went through these portals and saw these things, and that's where they get their ideas of the afterlife for? They're like, no, we have a portal and went and saw it, assholes. We're not making his shit up. We also have to come up with a name with this dope-ass Indiana Jones, ancient Egyptian theory tester guy.
The god was Sobek, but he's not the one that weighs your heart. That's Anubis that weighs your heart with against a feather.
Oh, okay. See, I'm wrong on more than one level.
How dare.
So you perked up at the mention of a Stargate, Michael. What have you, sir?
Yeah, I did, actually, because how can you not?
Stargate just sounds dope.
Yeah, it does. Gotta love the Stargates. So I've got this weird story. It starts, well, I guess it doesn't start, but the story ends with the death of a woman. Or maybe I shouldn't say the story ends, but the how do I don't fucking know, man. The mystery begins with the death of a woman named Hannah Courtois. She was born Hannah Peters, and she had kind of an interesting life. She was hired as a cleaner, or like a housemaid, I guess, for this old dude named John Courtois. And the rumors about her is that she was kind of a floozy and would carry on affairs with rich men in the hope that she could get money out of it.
Yeah. That's what I do.
This was kind of her reputation. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of the things printed about her now are. That's basically what they say. But honestly, the only reason that she's even notable is because of her mausoleum. So she was hired as the maid for John Courtois. She, by all accounts, carried on an affair with him. She had 3 daughters, a daughter named Marianne, a daughter named Elizabeth, and a daughter named Susanna. She claimed that all 3 of them were with this John Courtois character.
And where is this?
Oh, I'm sorry. I probably should have mentioned this. This was in London in the early 1800s. So Hannah herself was born in 1784. Her first daughter was born in 1801. Her last daughter was born in 1807. So during this time is when she was working for or with John Courtois. But apparently at the time, even though she said that these 3 girls were his, there were a lot of people, especially people within his family, that were questioning that, because John Courtois at the time was pretty old. He was born in 1709.
Shit.
So yeah, so he was getting on in years, and she's claiming that he's getting her knocked up. But he passed away in 1815. So he was over 100 years old when he died. And once he passed away, she took on his name, his last name. So now in history, she's known as Hannah Courtois. She apparently inherited all of his money. Now, what happens after this point? It's not really clear. It's up for some debate, but according to the story, she used this inheritance to fund expeditions for this Egyptologist, or I guess we could say archaeologist. He's a man of many talents, but this guy named Joseph Bonomi the Younger. His father was Joseph Bonomi the Elder, and they didn't want to use junior and senior, but Joseph Bonomi the Elder was an architect, and some of his sons went on to be architects as well, and Joseph the Younger, while not an architect by trade, also had he displayed some of this. But just to give you kind of a background on who this Joseph Bonomi guy was, he was born in the late 1700s. He was also British. He was born into a family of architects from London that were pretty well known. He decided to take a different route, though, and he studied at the Royal Academy, and in 1822 he decided to move to Rome, specifically to study under this guy named Antonio Canova, who was a sculptor, and he was known for his marble sculptures. Unfortunately, even though he specifically made these arrangements to go see him, this Antonio Canova guy died before Bonomi arrived. But he showed up in Rome anyway, and despite being disappointed, he decided to still study in Rome. So he stayed there for a few months, but then got too deep in debt and took a job with this guy named Robert Hay, who was a Scottish, basically a early days Egyptologist. But he got this paid job to go with Robert Hay on an expedition to Egypt. And this was, he never really had much of an interest in Egypt until he went on this expedition, and that kind of gave him a lifelong love for Egypt at that point. Like, he fell in love once he got there. But he wasn't being paid very well. Basically, what he was being paid to do was go on these expeditions with Robert Hay, and he would sketch any discoveries they found or any treasure, and he would do relief drawings of the hieroglyphs that they found, or try to capture artwork. Like, he would do sketches of the artwork to, just so he, at the time they didn't have cameras, so they're not able to take pictures of all these things. So they would hire these artists to come in and sketch the discoveries and things that they found. So because of this job, Bonomi actually created this device that was a drawing frame it was kind of like a viewfinder that had either wires or string across it to form a grid, so it would help him map out what he was drawing so that he could better recreate it. Basically, he was doing this job for a while. He got frustrated with it because he wasn't getting paid enough, and he couldn't go off on his own and draw his own stuff or look into his own stuff. He always had to draw what this Robert Hay guy wanted him to, because he was essentially his boss. So he ended up leaving and went to Cairo, where he illustrated this book called Excerpta Hieroglyphica, which was a book that was written by another early days Egyptologist from Britain named James Bird. And so he drew the illustrations for this book, and this actually ended up getting him a lot of money. And later down the road, he met up with Robert Hay again, and this time, because of his renown for doing the illustrations for this book, he was able to pull in a higher salary. So he went on further expeditions with him. And then he took tours throughout the Middle East. He went to Syria, he went to Palestine, stayed in Egypt a little longer, and then ended up eventually coming home. He did design a few things using some of his family's known architectural talents. He designed the entrance to Abney Park Cemetery, which is in London. And he also did the Egyptian facade for John Marshall's Temple Works in Leeds, England. And he did a few other things, but he also allegedly designed these mausoleums, one being the mausoleum of Hannah Courtoy. And that is kind of where their paths cross. It was said that Hannah Courtoy in her later years funded a lot of expeditions to Egypt, and it was thought that Joseph Bonomi was one of these beneficiaries. And the story goes that Joseph Bonomi had teamed up with this guy named Samuel Alfred Warner, who was this weird kind of, I don't want to say crackpot exactly, but he was like this weird inventor guy who apparently also dabbled in the occult.
Nice.
And yeah, so he's like he's like Dr. Doom or something, just a weird magical scientist guy. But he invented these things called invisible shells, and they were supposed to be these missiles or projectiles. They were basically what he described as long-range bombs. And he had a few. He was able to get some funding from the British Navy after he pitched this idea. But the thing with him was he would not teach anybody how to make them, and he would not show the plans for how to make them to anyone. But he had these things. He called them invisible shells, and he had a few demonstrations where he blew up some ships, but there was nothing to indicate that they were blown up from some source from a long distance. They could have just been rigged with dynamite and blown up. There was nothing to show how they blew up. They just blew up. But this guy claimed that he invented this during the Napoleonic Wars, and through this invention was able to destroy 2 of the enemy's ships. But there was no one that could verify this.
Now I see where you went with crackpot.
Yeah, his stories kind of had some things that were out of place. They didn't line up with the timeline. So who knows? But he claimed to have done this, and he had this whole plan for the invisible shell. But the story goes that he had teamed up with this Joseph Bonomi guy, and they were working on these experiments to either do time travel or teleportation based on this information that Bonomi was able to obtain on his expeditions to Egypt. He had apparently at one point uncovered some hieroglyphs written on a wall of a structure that was discovered that gave him the secret to teleportation and or time travel. Now, what a lot of people are, when they talk about this tomb, they talk about it in terms of being a time travel device. Something, even some people have even stretched as far to say that this is what the TARDIS from Doctor Who was based on.
Oh, wow.
Which doesn't really make sense, because this is a Egyptian themed mausoleum and the TARDIS is a phone booth. But apparently inside this tomb is the secrets to time travel. And in the mausoleum, Hannah Courtoy is buried there with her 2 daughters that never got married. So her oldest daughter, Marianne, and the middle daughter, Elizabeth. Susanna actually got married and moved on. But Hannah was put in this mausoleum along with her 2 daughters. But the weird thing is, the mausoleum was not built until 5 years after her death. There are all the other mausoleums that are in the cemetery, it's called Brompton Cemetery. I can't remember if I mentioned that, but all the other mausoleums and structures in the cemetery have a record of their construction, and there's blueprints, for lack of a better term, the architectural guidelines,
building plans and whatnot.
Yeah. But for this one, there's nothing. The door to the mausoleum has been locked, and the key has been missing for 150 years.
Whoa.
No one knows where the key is. No one has been inside it since her oldest daughter, or I'm sorry, I can't remember if it was her oldest or her middle. Whatever daughter died last. Since she was interred, no one has been in there. And this Joseph Bonomi guy, he has a gravestone that's in the same cemetery that's within sight of this mausoleum. And he's got this Egyptian etching on his stone showing Anubis, and Anubis is turned facing in the direction of this tomb. So people are connecting that like, hey, it's a clue. The other thing is that this Samuel Alford Warner guy died within weeks of the completion of this mausoleum. And there's no public record of how he died. He's allegedly buried in the cemetery in an unmarked grave.
So not at where his tombstone is?
No one knows. They know he's buried in the cemetery, but it's unmarked. And there's no record of how he died. He just died suddenly a few weeks after this mausoleum was finished. And the mausoleum itself has Egyptian hieroglyphs on it. There's these weird wheels that are engraved along the bottom of the door. And there's this part above the door. It's got a hole with 8 holes around it. And it looks like maybe it could be for a dial or maybe a clock or something like that, that had maybe been removed or something. There's theories about what happened to Samuel Alford Warner. And one theory suggests that Joseph Bonomi killed him because he was the only other one who knew about the time travel. But then there's a theory that he actually used this device and traveled to some other place and just never came back. So they came up with this whole thing about his death, and that's why there's no record of his death, and there's no actual gravesite for him. But there's also the theory that when Joseph Bonomi died, he didn't really die. He faked his death and also traveled using this device. And that his grave was kind of a clue, like, hey, Anubis is looking that way, and that's where I went.
Yeah, that's where my mind went to. I didn't think of murder at all, but maybe they stumbled on something, got this lady to fund it or something like that, and just everybody faked their own death and worked underground under this mausoleum. Finishing the Stargate portal, and they hopped in it and went to ancient Egypt.
But there's another theory that this isn't a time machine, as it's called, or as it's, as the story goes. But there's another theory that this mausoleum is actually a teleportation chamber that was designed by Joseph Bonomi and Samuel Warner. And as I mentioned before, Samuel Warner claimed that he had this magic missile that could just shoot things from a distance. And when he wasn't able to get funding, when he wasn't able to get funding from the Navy, they had to go and look for other sources of funding. But the idea is that maybe Bonomi had discovered this occult knowledge that would teach them how to magically teleport. And that's how he was able to deliver these devices, was through this weird magical teleportation. So they together they went to find a new sponsor, who they found with this guy named Lord Kilmorey. And he had apparently encouraged them to use this magical method, not for bombs, but for a different purpose. So they came up with this idea that they would create this teleportation grid around London. But they needed to put these teleportation centers in places where, one, they wouldn't be fucked with over the passage of time, and for two, that wouldn't be obvious if they were to just like appear. So they thought it best to develop these in cemeteries, because when you have a cemetery, they're not going to change over time. The cemetery, short of a bombing or the passage of hundreds of years, or if you are a developer from the movie Poltergeist, they won't. It's not going to change. Especially if you've got mausoleums and statues and things like that shit's gonna stay. So they figured they could just set these up and set them up in these. They're called the Magnificent Seven, but it's these 7 big cemeteries around London. I guess they form a ring or a circle around London. So they built one of these teleportation chambers in each of these places. And there's pictures of a couple of the other ones as well. They have kind of a similar structure, but they don't look as Egypt-y, I guess, as this one does.
Uh-huh.
But there's the one in Brompton and then there's another one in Highgate Cemetery. But there's 7 altogether, and they're able to apparently use it to transport from one end of London to the other, and that was what they had planned. But the story of their interaction with this Lord Kilmorey guy is even it gets weirder. So he was, I guess he was also an occultist. So he had that, maybe that's how he got to know Joseph Bonomi and Samuel Warner was because they were all into the occult and they were aware of this guy, and he's Lord Kilmorey. But he was also a notorious gambler. He was also known by the name Blackjack Needham, which sounds like a fucking cowboy name, honestly.
Yeah.
Or maybe a pirate.
Yeah, for the time pirate.
Yeah.
A poker pirate. Yar.
Yeah, poker pirate. Yar. But this guy was how do I put this? He's while being a lord, he was kind of a notorious character. Like I said, he was a gambler, he was an occultist, and he had this secret wedding with this young woman who was under his care. She was his ward. Her name was Priscilla Host. And they ended up getting secretly married. And because of the age difference and the relationship that he was taking care of her, he was her caretaker, she was his ward, a lot of the people in polite society looked down on it and started whispering and saying rumors and all that shit. But apparently this guy had 2 wives before this Priscilla, who had both left him, apparently due to his rituals that he would conduct, these magic rituals.
Ooh.
And they got to be too much that these women would leave. But this Priscilla ended up dying at a very young age, and according to I guess the doctors at the time, they said that her heart exploded. So because of this, he started to be known as a dark magician, or someone who would drive women away because of his demonic background. But this guy, after she died, he really, he didn't want her to leave. She was the love of his life. So he consulted with Joseph Bonomi to see if Bonomi had come across any sort of Egyptian magic that could reanimate her, bring her back to life, or give him a way to communicate with her. So Bonomi ended up working with this architect named Henry Edward Kendall to construct this mausoleum for Priscilla so that he would somehow be able to communicate with her. And he covered the mausoleum with hieroglyphs dedicated to Osiris, and they all told the story of the journey of the soul through the afterlife. Now, for anyone that doesn't know about Egyptian mythology, Osiris was killed but was resurrected. So he's looked at as being the god of death, but he's also the Lord of resurrection. So he, in a way, is kind of like the Jesus figure. He was killed by his evil brother Seth and then brought back to life. But anyway, I'm not getting into the mythology. I say it just because there's significance in dedicating it to Osiris, because Osiris died and came back from the dead. So initially this mausoleum was constructed in Brompton Cemetery, near to where the Courtois tomb was going to be built. But then they decided to move the structure to a place called Chertsey, and then to the grounds of Blackjack's house, known as Gordon House. And there he kept it hidden for years. And I'm not sure if it's still there or not, but it was said that he would dress up in all white, and he had this hidden tunnel that ran from his house to the mausoleum so he could get there underground. But he would dress in complete white, and he would lay in a coffin and have his servants wheel him through the secret tunnel, and then they would leave him next to Priscilla's body in the mausoleum. And he claimed that he was able to communicate with her while he was in there.
Huh.
So it's interesting that this guy would help with their funding when they're trying to do these experiments for the invisible shell, or the magic missile, or the psychic bomb, whatever you want to call it. And that Bonomi was previously tied to him for developing this allegedly magic mausoleum. And then there's the Hannah Courtois mausoleum that's also tied to these magical Egyptian rites.
That's crazy. I mean, what if they did stumble upon something?
What if they did, Mateo? What if they did?
Maybe this Lord dude was Barry Soetoro.
Oh, shit. Or evil time-traveling Barack Obama.
That's what I was thinking, but then he's
himself.
Like a gambler.
He's a Time Lord.
Yeah, he could be a Time Lord.
He's a shady character, and he's into the occult. I bet evil time-traveling Barack Obama is into the occult. It sounds like something he would do.
He has to be, right?
Yeah, you'd have to think so.
The plot thickens.
It does. You'll never escape evil time-traveling Barack Obama. No matter what you do, he's going to keep coming back. He's going to keep teleporting through dead people's mausoleums, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
He's coming for you, sucker. He's coming.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.